Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're putting on our historian hats to tackle a mystery where ancient mythology collides head-on with aerospace engineering. We're investigating a debate that has literally captivated engineers, historians, and independent scholars for over a century. Picture this: ancient Sanskrit manuscripts describing golden, metallic flying craft soaring above prehistoric landscapes. It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, the big question we're unpacking today is whether these descriptions were just elaborate imaginative myths, or if they could have actually been technical manuals. Did ancient India possess advanced aerial vehicles, or are we simply projecting modern technology onto ancient myths? That is the central question guiding our entire investigation today. We need to carefully weigh these incredible ancient wonders against rigorous objective evidence. Are we looking at a lost chapter of human innovation? Or are modern readers just projecting today's aerospace tech backward onto stories that were meant to be highly symbolic? Let's follow the evidence and find out. Section 1. The Legend of Vimanas. To start, we've got to look at our very first pieces of evidence, the oldest texts themselves. We're talking about foundational ancient Sanskrit literature, specifically massive epic narratives like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. In them, we find the word Vimana. Now, these aren't just described as your average chariots, but as extraordinary aerial vehicles. The texts describe them traveling massive distances across the sky, sometimes moving totally silently right above cities, and executing vertical ascents that seem completely impossible for any ancient technology to pull off. One of the most famous examples cited in these traditions is the magnificent Pushpaka Vimana, which was said to transport passengers across vast, sprawling empires. And this brings us to a major fork in the road regarding how we actually interpret these texts. To mainstream historians, these epic stories of flying palaces are purely cultural mythology, imaginative fiction from the ancient world. But alternative researchers argue something very different. They point out that these descriptions contain unusually specific technological details. They ask, could ancient authors have actually been preserving fragmented, fading memories of real machines? Or are we just reading highly symbolic mythology? Section 2. The Vaimanika Shastra Mystery. Okay, let's dive into this, because the debate gets incredibly specific when we introduce a highly controversial document that sits right at the center of this entire mystery. When we look at the contents of the Vaimanika Shastra, it is genuinely startling. This text surfaced much later, in the early 20th century, and it claims to describe the actual construction and operation of these flying machines. We're seeing references to aircraft structures, pilot training protocols, materials science, navigation systems, and even energy generation. It reads way more like a modern engineering blueprint than an ancient poem. So, as neutral historians, we really have to ask ourselves, what exactly are we looking at here? Does this text actually preserve remnants of a genuine, ancient technological tradition? Or, because it surfaced in the early 1900s, does it just reflect a much later attempt to imagine flight using the scientific language that was available at that specific time? The text explicitly mentions rotating mechanisms and liquid substances contained within metallic vessels. And let me tell you, this highly contested language has inspired decades of intense speculation. Section 3. Mercury-vortex propulsion theory. Let's see how this builds into the most famous and, frankly, the most tantalizing interpretation of these texts. Let's step into the laboratory for a second. Proponents of this theory argue that certain passages in the Vaimanika Shastra are describing a highly advanced propulsion system. Let's steel-man the engineering theory here and walk through the proposed mechanics. Step 1 involves taking liquid mercury and heating it. Step 2 is forcing that mercury into a rapid vortex-like rotational motion inside chambers. Step 3 suggests that this process generates intense pressure differentials, thermal expansion, and electromagnetic effects. Some speculative models even envision this spinning ring of liquid mercury generating unusual lift forces within the craft. It's an incredibly intriguing idea. But we need to bring ourselves back down to earth for a minute. It's true that in modern times, similar ideas occasionally pop up in fringe aerospace theories involving real concepts like plasma physics and electromagnetic propulsion. However, the absolutely crucial distinction is this: no verified scientific experiment has ever demonstrated that spinning liquid mercury creates antigravity or produces sustained lift. Mostly, it just creates a highly toxic mess. So the specific mercury-vortex model proposed by these interpretations remains entirely hypothetical. Section 4. Testing ancient engine designs. Now, despite the total lack of proof for anti-gravity, the imagery found in the Vaimanika Shastra is just so fascinating that independent engineers haven't been able to leave it alone. They've actively tried to reconstruct these designs both digitally and physically. Researchers have taken the translated passages and treated them as literal schematics. They've built theoretical models using CAD software and run computer simulations. These reconstructions include intricate metallic chambers, rotating cylinders, dedicated mercury reservoirs, integrated heat sources, and flow control mechanisms. They're essentially testing these ancient verses as complex fluid dynamic systems. And this brilliantly illustrates the yes but reality of this entire investigation. Because when you run the computer simulations, many of these designs actually do function mechanically. As fluid dynamic systems, they can successfully generate pressure and create gyroscopic effects. But when we evaluate their actual flight capability, there is zero demonstrated anti-gravity. No publicly verified prototype has produced reactionless thrust or performance that defies conventional physics. They work as rotating fluid systems for sure, but they completely fail to produce actual flight. Section 5. Mainstream science weighs in. Let's shift our lens now and look at the burden of proof. We need to examine exactly how mainstream scholarship and the broader scientific community evaluate the Vimana hypothesis. And honestly, mainstream scholarship remains highly skeptical, mainly because of the stark contrast between text and dirt. While the manuscripts claim detailed flight infrastructure, the archaeological reality is empty. We found absolutely zero physical evidence of mercury-powered aircraft. There are no confirmed engine fragments. There are no ancient manufacturing facilities. There's just no verified infrastructure to support an aerospace industry. This timeline puts the academic skepticism into perfect perspective. In ancient antiquity, the epic poetic stories of Vimanas emerge, but the detailed technical manual, the Vaimanika Shastra, doesn't surface until the early 20th century. Linguists argue that the passages reflect modern concepts, not ancient knowledge. Furthermore, in the 1970s, a famous engineering review was conducted, and it conclusively deemed the aircraft designs described in the text to be aerodynamically unviable. For these empirical reasons, the scientific community definitively regards the technological hypothesis as unproven. Section 6. The true power of Mercury. So the crucial point we have to make is this. If they didn't actually have mercury-powered engines, why were ancient cultures globally so obsessed with this specific liquid metal? Well, it breaks down exactly to why mercury was the perfect canvas for alchemical imagination all over the world, from India to China to Mesoamerica. Just look at its physical properties. It's a metal, yet it flows like water. To ancient observers, this looked like straight-up supernatural behavior. It's highly reflective, leading to its use as magical mirrors. And it responds dramatically to heat, making it the ultimate symbol for transformation and hidden power in ancient rituals and medicine. In fact, China's first emperor, King Shi Huang, was so obsessed with its supernatural properties, he was reportedly buried surrounded by literal rivers of flowing mercury. When we synthesize the historical evidence, a really compelling picture emerges. It's highly likely that early chemical observation with this deeply misunderstood element birthed these magical mythologies. Its unusual properties absolutely captivated ancient scientists and observers. And over centuries, those observations evolved, attributing vast magical properties to the metal. It strongly points to the conclusion that references to mercury in ancient texts were highly symbolic cultural touchstones, rather than literal nuts and bolts technological descriptions. Section 7. Synthesis, the dream of flight. To conclude our explainer today, let's bring all of these threads together: the ancient myths, the theoretical engineering models, and the strict consensus of historical science. Even if the empirical evidence stops short of proof for ancient anti-gravity, the cultural and historical value of these texts is profound. What remains undeniable is humanity's enduring dream of flight. Long before the Wright brothers, across thousands of years, civilizations were already imagining machines capable of transcending earthly limits. Whether Vimanas were lost engineering marvels, symbolic narratives, or somewhere in between, they are absolute proof of our timeless, universal desire to conquer the skies. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Proponents of the Vimana theory often remind us that the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence, pointing to countless technologies lost to time. It forces us to ponder the blurry line between history and myth. How much of humanity's past remains hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be understood? It's a question that invites all of us to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep searching. What's your theory? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.